Okay, transition stream over. People of the YouTube, let me know when you can hear us. Welcome to the call. Let's get started. The agenda is issue 1, 2, 3. Sharing. Right there. First on the agenda, testing and release updates. As you know, if you've been trying to work on v0.10.0, we had some issues with the BLS test generators. We didn't update them to the new APIs, and there was a failed SOC generic test which messed up those generators due to some import issue. There is a PR up for this. The tests for the BLS tests are being stripped down to just those that of the APIs that we're using, not asking for any essentially internal calls and things like that. Thank you for the review from Mami Cheng and Ben on that one, and Carl. So that is to be released because there are a few bugs. Yes, sorry, there were bugs in the v0.10 release. We're going to release a minor bump to v0.10.1 that has these bug fixes and the fixed test generators. Essentially, it's v0.10 with a couple of bug fixes that are very, very small. It's not substantive stuff. It's substantive in the respect that they fix bugs, but not in we're going in and changing things. That will be released by the end of tomorrow. Sorry about that, but thank you for everyone helping me get it out the door. Proto is not here, but Proto's been doing a bunch of work getting the repo updated to 3.8, also integrating his remerkable, which greatly speeds up the PySpec to something like I'll let him share the numbers if he joins us, but very, very fast to the extent that we can start doing a little bit more interesting tests and things with the PySpec. So that's great. In addition to that, been working on integrating those structurings into what's going on with the phase 1 stuff, and phase 1, at least as it stands today, will be finally gotten out of that PR into dev. Still a lot of work to do, but the build passes. There's some base sanity tests, things like that. Cool. None of that will affect most of you too much, except for that release. Any other testing and release updates?
Yeah, sure. I've got a Beacon Fuzz update.
Excellent.
Hey everyone, since our last update on this call, we've published a comprehensive blog post detailing our approach and current challenges with Beacon Fuzz. We've confirmed that the crash identified on Nimbus is indeed a bug related to the compute committee function as part of the attestation processing. So essentially, when passed an invalid or out of bounds committee index, the compute committee function raises an assertion error, which leads to a crash. And we've just identified yesterday an issue in Trinity related to the validate proposer slashing function. And it's actually also affecting the validate voluntary exit function. So basically, these two functions crash when passed an operation with an invalid validator index. So essentially, index errors exceptions are not handled as validation errors. We've opened an issue and submitted a PR for a fix, and it was actually approved a couple of hours ago. So it's always exciting to see Beacon Fuzz finding more issues out there. We've revamped the way we're building fuzzers. We made the build process a lot more maintainable, with basically less copy pasting. We've deployed a few more fuzzers on fuzzits. We're still exploring ways to fix the namespace clash. We have been dealing with basically 2 Golang implementations. So the blog post explains in detail all the possible options, and Prashamek is currently essentially trying them all. We should hopefully have this resolved by next Monday. Alternatively, we might have to deploy fuzzers with production clients only, so essentially removing the executable specifications via NTM PySpec. We're currently looking at integrating the Java client, which should be done by the next update. We'll be reaching out to the Harmony Artemis team over the next couple of days. We've identified another difference in the block header processing function on Nimbus, but it actually turned out to be related to the fact that BLS signature verification was enabled for Nimbus and disabled for the other implementations. So we've therefore submitted a PR to introduce a compile time flag to skip BLS signature verification in Nimbus. We'll have a new blog post detailing our progress, either at the end of next week or at the beginning of the following week. And as soon as a couple of clients are upgraded to the latest version of the spec, we'll be updating our fuzzers accordingly. That's it for Beacon Fuzz. Thank you.
Awesome. That's all great. So presumably those two tests, two crash-inducing errors highlight paths that we're not testing in the PySpec tests. So I'll circle back with you or some of the people working on it and see if we can add some tests to PySpec.
Yes, sounds good. We have the corpora, both the beacon state and the actual block objects that trigger these crashes. So it should be easy to add them to your testing suite.
Sweet. Thank you. Any questions for Mehdi? Great. Other testing release updates?
Is there any update to the Fortress spec test?
Great question. There are now two independent formats floating around. One that Paul has been working on and one that members of the Harmony team have been working on, neither of which are integrated into PySpec, but both of which can be used to begin to work on some conformance. Again, I said this 2 weeks ago. I've had trouble. Proto and I have had trouble prioritizing that in light of just making sure that the current spec and things are ready to go for y'all. So I will circle back on that today.
Oh, that's no problem because we actually have Paul's testing framework implemented. Just Paul and I are been talking about using a proto array for choice, so that's fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a
Go on.
no different topic. You finish first.
Oh, I was gonna say, if you do integrate tests that are generated off of Lighthouse, I'd love to know if y'all are in conformance.
I just want to go back to the fuzzing a second. I'm curious how we should approach states which would not result from normal block processing. So basically, I don't know, some random data in the state object.
Yeah,
that's one of the way that an invalid validator index might happen, right? That something in the state is already wrong, but nothing in the state should ever be wrong because all the blocks we apply to it limit the space of possible states.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. That's something we sort of had to deal with in Lighthouse as well. I think our general recommendation would be to sort of propagate these errors the right way and checking for these assertions and not basically crashing when they happen. So allowing your client to recover from that, which should not be too complicated. So we almost have a PR to fix that particular bug on Nimbus. The Trinity bug is, again, as I said, already fixed. Just the PR just needs to be merged. But yeah, you're right. Some of these bugs are triggered from what someone could consider invalid beacon states.
So if the beacon state is invalid, what's like? There's really nothing better you can do than exit, no?
Because it's debatable. It's always the Sorry, go ahead.
Like any attestations and blocks that you produce will be weird.
Yeah. Did you guys have a chance to investigate that particular input on your end?
No.
Okay.
But we've had something similar, where basically we ended up ejecting all the validators. And then when you try to find, a validator index, you get an empty committee. And then there are places in the spec where empty committees are not checked for.
Yeah.
So I think the case, like that's kind of realistic-ish. Like if you have really bad luck with, no, you shouldn't have that much bad luck with the sampling. But if you have very few validators, some of the committees might be empty and some might go on. So technically, there's a chance that this chain could recover, but it's not very meaningful because there are so few validators. And we've had to deal fix cases like that, and those we're handling as part of normal processing, even though it doesn't really make sense, neither from an economic point of view, to have a chain with so few validators, or to keep going in a meaningful way. If you don't have any validators, then you can't introduce any new ones, so you're kind of screwed anyway.
Yeah, I hear you. Makes sense. I think I would say generally, if we can make sure that the clients can recover from these cases, I would strongly recommend implementing those fixes. Again, for Nimbus, for that particular test case, I think the fix is relatively simple, and definitely for Trinity, that's actually the invalid index is caused by a malformed, basically a block. It's not a problem with the state itself. It's a block processing issue. So yeah.
Yeah, I'd at least angle towards not crashing, and if you are in some weird state, knowing it, and then going from there.
But Nat's almost got a PR for you guys. We're just not sure whether we should give you some time to investigate internally, but we can circle back and have a chat on the fuzzing channel.
Yeah, let's do that. I mean, I think the best thing you can do in that case is basically dump the state and stop, because somehow you got to that state and you want to probably log some diagnostic information or whatever, but
yeah, totally.
You can't really continue to meaningfully work, right?
It's basically the in programming language with the question of error versus exceptions. Should you crash now to avoid further corruption, or should you hand over to the caller who's supposed to know better about the context?
Yeah, it's almost a philosophy question in software engineering, right? Depending on who you ask, people tend to adopt an approach as opposed to another. I'm personally inclined to propagate the error and let the caller handle it in a hopefully safer way, but definitely debatable.
Okay, let's debate offline. Fantastic. Thanks, Mehdi. Okay.
Yeah, for the record, I'm not disagreeing. I'm just exploring.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sounds good.
Great. Client updates. Let's go with Artemis.
Right, that'll be me. So we merged 0.9.4 into master earlier this week. We've made all the changes for 0.10.0 as well, including all the BLS changes. We would pass the reference tests if the tests were correct. We won't be merging this just yet. We're going to wait until there are some joint multi-client testnets at that level. Before we do that, we're hoping to join some of the existing testnets with 0.9.4 in the meanwhile. We're continuing to implement the Eth2.0 data changes for 0.10.0, and we are debugging and improving discovery and sync all the time. And we've also started putting some serious effort into optimization. We've sort of put it off until now, but that's probably underway. So expect some good performance improvements. There's plenty of low-hanging fruit there. And finally, you may have picked this up elsewhere, but we are officially changing the name. Unfortunately, NASA stole the name Artemis for their latest space program. That's not really the reason. We have a trademark clash. unfortunately. So in future, Artemis will be known as Teku, T-E-K-U, alongside Besu, which is our Ethereum 1 client. So it's Besu and Teku. And at some point, we'll get around to renaming the repo and all the rest, but it's not top priority just now. That's all I think from us.
Long live Teku. Thanks, Ben. Lodestar.
Hey y'all. So past few weeks we've merged in our initial 0.9.2 branch, and we're working through 0.9.3. We are working on integrating our new SSE library into Lodestar, working through a few bugs and getting it up to passing all the spec tests. And we've recently got a new team member, Frankie. She'll be helping us out, and we're getting her onboarded right now.
Cool.
And I believe those are the major highlights.
That SSE library has some major gains, right?
Oh yeah, kind of underplaying that there, but yeah, SSE library. We've been working on it for probably a month or so now. It has a lot of gains kind of across the board. So like serialization, deserialization is roughly 5 times faster than before. It also lets us operate on immutable Merkle trees as SSE objects, and like when we're doing that, hash tree routing is a lot faster because we have the tree there, and we're planning on swapping out our beacon state object with a Merkle tree backed object. And if you guys have been looking at there's a certain spec PR where they've updated the PySpec to do something similar to this. There've been like really significant gains. We're planning on doing the same thing, basically. So for a preview, you can look at that PR, but we're planning on going in the same direction.
Is this TypeScript or WASM?
It's TypeScript. We have a very experimental WASM based Merkle tree, but right now, like the gains are so big that we don't really need to go there.
Yeah, the gains are like on the order of 1000x for many operations, right?
Yeah, exactly, like 1000x. And then so when you have like such a fast hash tree route, like hash tree route, I don't know, we can do like 4,000 hash tree routes of a Merkle tree of a beacon state per second. So when you have such a fast hash tree route, you can use that as like the key of like some kind of cache. So you can do like what do you call it? You can basically cache a lot of these different state transition functions, even if they're naive. You cache them by the hash tree root of whatever piece of the state you're dealing on, and memoization, I guess, is what you call it. So you can memoize these different functions, and like just that speed is like enough to speed up the state transition by like a lot. Basically, for us, it's like where right now we're just not fast enough for mainnet to being like, I would say, pretty competitive for mainnet. So we're working on just actually benchmarking out, getting real numbers for that. So I can say, instead of saying a lot, I can tell you exactly how much faster, what exactly that looks like.
Is the website simpleserialize.com updated with the new functions?
No, it's not. So right now, there are still just a few. I'm not passing all the spec tests, and I want to do a little more polishing. And so it'll probably be a week or so before, at least before I can get to that.
All right, cool. Yeah, at some point, like we have the state transition function in WASM published somewhere on the webpage. It would be cool to compare them at some point.
Yeah, I'd love to see that.
Great. Thanks, Cayman.
Yeah.
Nethermind.
Unmute. Okay. Never mind. Where are we at with my notes? So we've been working on peer-to-peer using the Rust library for a quick solution for that. With some help from Johnny Ria, we've got a .NET example working on OS X. Having issues on Linux, but we've got to implement it for Windows, and then integrate in with our main application. But because it's the same library, obviously once that's integrated, it should just talk to the other implementations. So yes, that'll be in the coming weeks, I guess.
Great. Thank you. Glad to hear y'all got the rest of the P2P going.
Yeah, only example so far, but we've got it working on OS X and it's talking with the native stuff, so that's good.
Great. Trinity.
Everyone. Let's see. So a big chunk of work has been updating our client to 0.9.3, which we've landed most of that. Moving ahead to 0.10. We have a couple big PRs to migrate pilot P2P to Trio, which is a Python library that should help a lot with stability in terms of the concurrency of our networking layer. We have another PR for the validator client to pull that out, and then some work on our beacon node APIs to support that. And probably our most exciting thing this week, Yannick has been working on our Disk V5 implementation. So he's doing some experiments connecting to Lighthouse. We can successfully pull down ENRs from their network. So that's pretty cool. And yeah, those are the main things, working towards public testnets.
Thanks, Alex. Okay, and the next three, I think y'all all have some version of a public testnet. I'm curious, along with your update, the biggest hurdle, if there is one, that you're currently facing with those testnets. Let's start with Prismatic.
Yeah, hey everyone, Raul from Prismatic. So we've been running our mainnet testnet for 2 weeks with not really significant issues. So we have 32,000 active, 29,000 active validators, 32,000 total. And at the moment, we've been just working through rapid iteration with users on a lot of improvements to kind of the user experience, fixing up memory and CPU consumption, which is currently the biggest problem. The biggest problem, a lot of it has to do with copying state fields due to a lack of immutability in Go. So that eats up memory at an alarming rate. And also, of course, the biggest bottleneck ends up being some parts of hash tree root. So there's multiple efforts working on this to resolve. One of the biggest optimizations that we did was offloading expensive computation that's done many, many times to background workers that cache it. So, you know, if we have like 1,000 validators on one node, you know, one validator requests for some piece of data, there's a worker in the background that kind of delegates and returns that value to any other future validators that might request it. Aside from that, the other biggest bottleneck was fork choice. But Terrence worked with Proto and Paul to get that implementation and fixed it into Prism. So now we're basically seeing it disappear from our flame graphs. Yeah, we're working on a lot of unit testing coverage, and we added some interesting stuff like slashing protection to the validator client. So for double voting, surround voting, and also double proposals. Aside from that, we have this slasher architecture that is listening to attestations and things happening in the testnet. And essentially we'll track slashing offenses and submit that to the beacon node. So we're still working on wrapping up that aspect of slashing of the slasher itself. Yeah, so I would say the biggest issue right now is just fixing up resource consumption of the beacon of the beacon nodes at the moment.
Gotcha, and that's computation seems to be the bottleneck.
Yeah, so we fixed memory already.
Mhm.
Now at this point, it's just really CPU. There's so much stuff going on in like the life cycle of a single slot.
Right. Gotcha. Do you have an estimation on the amount of nodes on the network?
Yeah, so on average, nodes have around 80 to 100 peers. There's a website that came out recently called Eth2.0 Stats.io, created by Eth2.0. So essentially, they show people can register their nodes. So we only run on the order of like 7 or so. We know the community runs a lot more than that. So yeah, so you can see kind of which ones people have registered on there. But aside from that, we haven't done a recent topology mapping of everything.
So given peer counts more than 50.
Yes, I think that's accurate. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, great. Thanks, Raul. Let's see. Lighthouse.
Yeah, that'll be me again. So we've been adapting Proto Lambda's Proto Array fork choice to work in an Eth2 context. We're in the final stages of testing, and it's been running on several testnet nodes. We're seeing some great improvements there, by the way. We still need to investigate one error we've been seeing. Paul's on it. And yeah, Paul's a big fan of the proto array approach, and he definitely recommends it to the other teams. He's gained an appreciation for the nuances in the fork choice rule, and we're super keen to see some cross-client testing in the hopefully very near future. We're in the process of updating to 0.10.0. Our BLS implementation has been updated in the last couple of days. We're now working to pass test vectors. And I guess a rough ETA for a first working version would be late next week. We're adding a HTTP API to our validator client to allow for the management of validators, creating validators, deleting validators, exiting, etc. We're currently dealing with some locks that occur during heavy API usage while the node is syncing. So we found that we were essentially jamming our scheduler with long-running block import tasks, which was causing chaos with mutexes. And we've implemented a workaround for now until we can swap over to the latest iteration on Rust async programming, which uses a work stealing scheduler. We've identified a fork choice bug in our testnet that actually allowed us to discover new bugs and new issues in our syncing logic. So we've been addressing all reported bugs from the previous testnet and patching Lighthouse as new ones are discovered. We've built a new dedicated thread for block processing that takes the load out of other Lighthouse processes, which was causing some unexpected issues with timeouts. We've added some more robust syncing logic to handle malicious invalid peers. We're now testing our syncing with some custom adversarial peers on the testnet. It's going pretty smoothly so far. We're continuing to make progress on what we call our V0.2, which will introduce a significant network upgrade with the introduction of sharded subnets. We're seeing a lot more community engagement in Lighthouse, which is great. We've been taking lots of feedback and implementing lots of small UX fixes. We're also seeing significant interest in our validator client UI proposals. You guys might have seen the RFP that we pushed out a few weeks ago. We're still processing the responses. The deadline to respond is the end of next week, 31st of January to be precise, and we'll be announcing the winning vendor shortly after. We're also making great progress on the hiring front. So we're looking at hiring 1 to 2 more Rust developers. Late applications are still accepted, but time's definitely running out. We're looking at moving fairly quickly on this. And finally, we're also still looking for people to help on a contracting basis with some DevOps work, primarily around deploying and maintaining testnets. So we're looking to deploy testnets with hundreds of nodes, potentially thousands, most probably using AWS. So please reach out to Paul via Discord or Twitter if you're interested, or if you know someone who's interested. That's it for Lighthouse.
Biggest hurdle in those testnets?
I think we definitely had a lot of issues when dealing with fork choice. So the work that Paul's been doing lately over the last couple of weeks, I'd say, with Proto has been quite instrumental to fixing those bugs. But apart from that, testnet's been running fine. We took some validators offline, which resulted in some skip slots, which highlighted some bugs that we haven't actually seen before in our syncing. So that was quite interesting. Yeah, no, everything's going quite smoothly on the testnet front. Still about 16,000 validators, looking hopefully at upgrading to v0.10, as I said, perhaps late next week, and then upgrading the boot nodes and going from there.
Do you have an estimation on the number of nodes on that network right now?
If you give me a few seconds, I think we're about 40. Don't quote me on this. I'll have to double check on our dashboard. Yeah, we've got about 20 nodes, 20 peers, sorry, 20 peers connected.
Right. Yeah, I see the 20 peers per node. I guess implies somewhere in that range, if not more. Okay, cool. Thanks. I think we're all keen to see testnets with more validators, but at this point, even more keen to see testnets with more nodes. I think, the 20 to the 100 range is still slightly in the toy range of the amount of nodes we expect to see on mainnet, somewhere on the order of 1,000, 10,000 if we're in the same range as the current Ethereum network. And so I think there's going to be some interesting stuff that falls out from gossip and discovering things that we're not yet seeing.
Yeah, our testnet is still, I'd say, semi-public.
Right.
We haven't really communicated around the relaunch of the testnet. So,
I blogged about it last week, so.
Fair enough.
Cool. Thanks, Mehdi.
Thank you.
And Nimbus.
Yes. So in Nimbus, we have the spec 0.10 implemented, except crypto. The crypto BLS part should land by Monday, I think, and it's implemented using Milagro. We pass 0.10 test vectors, waiting for the new test vectors that Danny mentioned at the beginning of the talk on BLS and SSE. On Ethereum 1, we started to implement something called EVMC, which is an API to be able to switch between Geth, ALES, the C++ implementation, a Java implementation, and Nimbus. So this is work in progress, and we are looking into how to reuse Nimbus Ethereum 1 code for Ethereum 2 phase 2. With regard to testnet, we are now we can use a mixed Lippy2P or Go Lippy2P daemon with Nimbus. And I'll hand over to Zari after the other updates so that he can explain the hurdles and the number of nodes. Well, your questions, Danny. Otherwise, most of the team will be in Brussels for FOSDEM and the week after, between February 1st and February the 7th. So if you want to chat or meet us physically, you're welcome to reach out to us on our Discord. And we will be holding a kind of interop-like event, and we will, in particular, clone other clients' testnets and repo, so Prism and Lighthouse, so that we can test with everyone physically there, test how to connect to those clients. We also had some weekend projects from one community member, and he managed to build a Nimbus on Android and run it on the phone. And otherwise, Jacek also had some kind of weekend project, and we now have something called NBindGen that can generate bindings to Rust libraries. So you can easily use Rust libraries within NIM. And now I'll hand over to Zari to explain what we have on the testnets.
All right, on the testnets front, we've been trying to balance between implementing needed new features such as Discovery 5, the naive attestation aggregation, and so on, and the long-lasting effort of making the testnet more stable. In Discovery 5, we've merged the latest code and we try to integrate with both the daemon and the new native developed with P2P. And we are currently experimenting with connecting to the Lighthouse testnet and obtaining ENRs from there. On the stability front that I mentioned, we've seen for a few weeks already various issues that arise in longer running testnets. For example, where nodes are restarted or join the network later, we've seen various issues with the data structures, the database maintained by the node, and the algorithms that initialize the data structures for what we call block pool and attestation pool. Basically, we are seeing that sometimes when the nodes are restarted, their data structures are not initialized properly and the node starts misbehaving. So that's our part of the focus is fixing various issues like this. On the number of nodes, we haven't been advertising our network, but it's running on 10 different servers with 2 nodes per server. So we have 20 nodes online at all times.
Gotcha. Thanks, Audrey. Okay, I think that was everyone. Great. Proto did join us. Proto, do you have anything to add? I went over a little bit the fact that we're bumping to 3.8, Python 3.8, and that you're integrating Remarkable, and that the phase 1 stuff is going to be in dev soon. Anything else on your end?
Right, it covers it pretty well. And then Cayman explained the SSC changes as well. So having binary tree backed SSC library, or at least using this technique for some parts of the state, is really effective, especially when you use this to come up with the keys for your memorization of the state properties. So PassBack gained a lot from this as well in speed, and this plus phase 1 changes plus usability, the thing all gets to be a lot easier to install and to play around with as an outside contributor. All lands in dev pretty soon.
Right, that's something I forgot. The ability to just pip install the specs repo is going to be there and much more easy than it currently is. Thanks, Berto. Research updates. Dankra, do you have anything on our end? You're muted if you're talking. Otherwise, yeah, go on.
So I guess on my end, I'm currently, one of the things I'm currently looking into is like whether we should change the proof of custody to 256-bit blocks, which seems probably like the more elegant option and odds more performant. And I'm looking into whether that's doable in the MPC. And otherwise, I guess the other thing I'm currently looking at is data availability, where we just got a team to implement the binary fast Fourier transform, and we'll hopefully get some good performance numbers from that to basically make some decisions, for example, what the binary field size should be, and also whether we can do that in a slot, or if even like the block producer can immediately do all the data availability stuff, or if we have to outsource that to like sort of super nodes to provide the data availability proofs.
Gotcha. Thanks, Dankra. Yeah, I mean, I mentioned before ongoing work on the phase 1 specs. Really hoping to see something relatively clean and stable in the next couple of weeks. Want to give a couple of teams something to dig into on that so we can start seeing some prototypes, but we're not quite there yet. TXRX.
Hey, how's it going? Okay, so over the past few weeks, we've been working on a couple different projects. Mikhail has been working on this E22 bridge, and I have some notes from him about what he thinks about that, if anyone's interested, and kind of like reviewing the proposals and documentation that's out there right now. Alex has been working on some decentralized time sync. I have been working on cross shard transactions, just mainly like reviewing literature and working on this Python the tester for it. And then I think that's pretty much. Oh, I'm sorry, Anton and Dimitri have been working on Discovery v5 testing, and I think that's it for now.
Yeah, I'll jump in and say that I'm working with this is Johnny, by the way. I'm working with Matt Garnett on EE tooling, and so we basically kind of spec'd out a plan for, I don't know, like a truffle or a EE kind of test framework, and he's kind of working on an initial implementation of like a transaction EE, and I created kind of like a cargo plugin to for Rust to kind of generate the framework of an EE, but I'll let Matt talk more about this when it's Cool's turn.
Cool. Thanks, guys. Other research updates.
It's Sam from Quilt here. Just some stuff we've been working on since the last call. We hosted a phase 2 call and discussed the phase 1 to phase 2 transition plan and a general phase 0 to phase 1 transition plan. There's also a write-up we released to support that. Ansgar and I released a state provider write-up that goes over some of the details of push and pull models of getting state to state provider or to block proposers. We have a roadmap for our simulation is formalized, and we're moving forward on it. We're figuring out how to attach that and simulate different state provider models. What else? I've been working on a small write-up that makes the case for investigating dynamic state access. I'll be posting that soon, so hopefully you'll all be interested in reading that. We've been going through scenarios on our cross-shard framework for managing ETH and EE balances, and I think that's pretty much everything we've been working on at Quilt. Let me know if I missed anything, guys.
Thanks, Sam. Great. Other research updates before we move on. As you're likely aware, the runtime verification audit and formal verification of the deposit contract bytecode has been published and is up for review. If you or anyone from your team has kind of the technical expertise to dig in and take a look at the formal specs and provide any input or feedback and review, please do. Now's the time before this thing goes to production. Always good to get some more eyes on it. Great. That's it for research updates. Thank you. Networking. So we do have a call in about 6 days, a networking call. I think the core of which we will address any practical items related to the sync, current specs issues we're seeing, and then move on to more researchy items if we have time. There's also this PR up for adding a response code. It looks like there's a lot of active discussion. I didn't have time to review it this morning, but if it's still up for debate on Wednesday, we'll hash it out there. As I said, I'm very eager to see some load tests in number of validators, obviously, but more so in number of nodes. So if you're doing any kind of that work, talk to me. Otherwise, we can talk about it a little bit more on Wednesday. Other networking related items worth bringing up today.
I think we might announce that noise passed into the spec repo in the G2P, which might be of interest to people. That means to start implementing that.
Yes, thank you, Yasik. And y'all have done some rudimentary work there, right? Or some initial work on the noise integration?
No, not really.
Oh, okay. Or maybe
No, we've looked at the problem, but
gotcha.
No. We're just fooling around.
Yeah, same on our end. I think Adrian's been looking at it, but haven't gotten around actually starting the implementation.
Gotcha. And I think one of the reasons it was selected is there's wide language support for the base protocols, but once somebody implements it, I'd be curious to hear about the complexity of the integration, actually using it. Okay, we can talk about that more on Wednesday. Other networking related items?
Yes, so although I've been busy with lots of other things, there are, the naive attestation aggregation technique is getting improved. So I want to do some careful improvements. So like not directly pivot to like this one new aggregation strategy that completely changes things. But instead, I think we can at least get a lower upper bound on the cost of local aggregation, while still being gossip sub compatible. And so this basically means I'm talking with Protocol Labs people to achieve this. We can change how we track what other peers know and what you decide to drop. And doing this, you can decide to drop messages that are already part of an aggregate that are known by your peers. And so you can try and reduce messages that way, while still being like able to propagate these aggregates. So you don't have full local aggregation anymore. You can propagate these aggregates that all fit nicely in a subtree. So you know others that follow the same strategy will be able to merge them.
Cool, thanks. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about it on Wednesday, or if you have some time to write up the basics of your thoughts, it'd be good to see. Thanks, Proto. Anything else? Okay. Spec discussion. I know there's a new version of the spec dropped very recently. There's some missing tests, but does anything come up in this that they'd like to discuss? Herman shared 1578, which was an issue posted by Justin for dual key voluntary exits, which allowed either the hot key or the cold key for the voluntary exit. I think the main pushback on that is that the cold key in the long run probably won't be a key, but instead a piece of code or a pointer to an E and a message rather than a key. I suppose the counter to that is just use it as it is today and then add something more sophisticated in the future, but it's hard to know, depending on what the structure turns into, whether we can add that more sophisticated feature in the future. And I guess specifically, it's worth highlighting the use case here. The use case likely being, I'm in a custodial staking service. I have the cold key. I do not have the signing key. And the staker starts doing something wrong. If they do something sloshable, they'll be kicked out. But maybe, for instance, they go offline. They go totally dark. I can't talk to them. Rather than reaching the ejection balance, I could instead, if they were offline for 2 days or something like that, just initiate and exit myself. It's a valid use case. Other thoughts on this? I need to think about it a little bit more on the implications of the future key. But Herman, yeah, you brought it up.
Danny, now the thing is, if we have the assurance that the pre-signed message is effective always, we don't need to do a major modification to the protocol. Just do as Vitalik suggested.
Right. So you can do that, right? The custodial staker could give you a signed voluntary exit that has that was for, say, your activation at Epoch, which is fine, and you can hold that. There are some strange cases in which someone, maybe an adversary who makes a some fork of the chain, could take some of these messages and make you exit early in this fork. And so there are subtle risks there that are not that detrimental, likely in most cases. I need to think about it a little bit more. But that's probably a reasonable approach. I forgot that was suggested there. If I or anyone else thinks of some deeper issue with that method, then we'll share, but we'll leave the issue open for another couple of days for any more conversation. Thanks, Herman.
Not really a spec discussion, but as a general comment, I've implemented the hash2 curve spec, the new one for 0.10, and the crypto spec is quite nice because it's blending high-level goals, the design rationales, and the implementation. So you have both the implementation, which is what we have, and also why we are doing things like this. And I know that we had some feedback about the spec being kind of obscure about on the intent, and well, that's just a comment about the crypto spec.
An implicit comment about the terseness of the spec.
It may be a good time to unveil my secret weekend project, which is to put together an annotated spec. So I'm working on that with rationale and digging through GitHub for all the reasons why we did all that stuff, because this has been a pain point for a long time. So that is something I'm just doing as a personal project, but there may be other efforts underway.
Yeah, awesome.
I will publish the first fruits of that in 2 or 3 weeks.
Great, and we're continuing to update this phase 0 for humans, which is not totally complete in all the things that a spec probably needs, but using it for helping people get on board with audits and things. Maybe some combination of these multiple paths will get us where we want to be. Other items, spec items, general items. I think a number of people will be in Denver maybe we'll add like a channel to the Discord for that, and a number of people will be in Stanford right after for SBC. So
yep, Denny, we're gonna do a workshop right the day after on February 22nd.
great. Do y'all have like resources around that, or an invite out, or anything like that that we should be looking for?
Yeah, sure. I dropped it in the chat, but I'll drop it in again.
Great. Thanks, Joseph.
Yep, there you go.
Eth2.0.
A couple of us will be at the ECC in Paris as well. I'm not sure it's worth doing something together there.
Yeah, absolutely. I will not be in Paris, but some people from my team certainly will be, and I know others will. So organize away. I'm excited to hear about y'all's individual interop effort to mess with some multi-client testnets. Maybe when others get together at some of these events, that might be a good target as well.
Yeah, I'll be in Paris as well. Definitely keen to catch up, yes.
Can we maybe also just create a channel for Paris as well then, to coordinate things?
Yeah, let's add those 3 channels to the Discord, just so people can easily communicate and at least meet up for dinner when they're there.
I saw somewhere that there's going to be an ETH2 client summit potentially in Vienna around Eth2.0. Is that confirmed?
I haven't heard of this, but I'll be there.
Who's organizing it?
I actually, if there's going to be enough of us there, I will be there and I will organize something. I hadn't thought about it until this very moment.
I'll be there as well. I'm pretty sure I saw this somewhere on Twitter, but I might have just dreamt it. It's getting late here.
If you come across the source, let me know, because I'll collaborate with them.
I'll try to dig it up now.
Well, so shout out to Maria Paula. She has been like pushing for Eth2 to have like a bigger stage on different hackathons, conferences. So I think she's organizing already like at least the educational part, like the part where we hopefully like can answer questions to people who go to the conference and like collect like dev experience feedback.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, I found it. Yeah, it was definitely MP who posted about this. I'll link you all the link post.
Thanks. Okay. I believe that we will have one of these in 2 weeks. I'll have to look at, actually look at my calendar real quick. I'm going to be on a plane that day at the exact time of this call. So we'll schedule around that, or someone else will run the call. I'll let y'all know soon. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate the good work. Talked to a lot of y'all at the networking call. You know, keep pushing on those testnets. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Bye.